What is up, conscious monkeys? Our countdown continues with the number third most underrated podcast of the first year of traveling to consciousness. And coming in at number three is episode 017, analyzing the teachings of Neville Goddard's manifestation technique with Tiara Alicea. Now, this podcast did okay with downloads, a little bit more than I'd honestly had the most out of all the podcasts on our list. However, I believe that this is a very underrated one for the very simple fact of what we talk about in this podcast actually happens. It actually talks about the secret, talks about how your vibration, attaching it to your vision is what actually manifests. We get into our interpretation of it, the way we break it down. What does it even mean to be on your highest timeline? And so much more. This is why I believe that this should be higher. Also, Tiara has became a great friend who I've talked to quite a bit over the past year, I guess, because she was also on episode 3, which didn't make the list because I was kind of getting my feet wet with the podcast, and quite frankly, that episode got more downloads than this one. But I believe that this one, in my opinion, is a bit better. It needs more downloads. And again, it was earlier in the podcast. Release date was January 10th of 2022. So maybe you haven't heard of it yet. With that being said, I'm going to let myself take it over. I'm going to let Clayton and Tiara take it over, and let's hear what they have to say.
Traveling to consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
We're back. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. I'm your host, Clayton Q. And today I am joined again by the all-powerful Tiara Alicea. We first had a conversation on episode 002. Then the podcast was branded a little bit differently, and we were still trying to figure out what we were doing. But I like to think that that episode helped lay some groundwork for what we're doing now. And a big point of that podcast that we talked about was the idea of your best timeline. Now, it's not going to be a requirement you go and listen to that podcast. However, it might help set some groundwork for this conversation. If we start talking and you're like, what the hell is going on here? Go check it out. But in this conversation, we're going to just keep that going. And something that Tiara and I both have kind of been messing around with is this idea of your best timeline versus you being able to create your timeline. We had started reading a guy by the name of Neville Goddard, and he has this idea of you can basically, manifest or create what you want. And that's kind of where Tiara and I said, okay, we need to pause this conversation and save it for the podcast. So before we jump into all of that, Tiara, is that a good way to kind of wrap up or summarize where we're at in the dialogue?
Yeah, I think that was perfect, honestly, because we do tend to talk a lot outside of the podcast about this stuff, and we try to save the most important parts for moments like this where we can share it with people. And I also love the rebrand because I feel like that's also very on brand with, just what we talk about, what you talk about with other people on your other podcasts. So I love that.
I appreciate hearing it. Gives me a little bit more confidence. There's
Yeah.
probably an ego thing, but I want my name in there, and then
Yeah, sometimes, but you gotta separate the identity from, I guess, the purpose sometimes.
100%, 100%. Yeah. So without going too much into the rebrand, so where, so when we left it off, we were talking about your best timeline, being that you're performing at your optimal state. And I'm
Hmm.
not really sure how to describe it anymore because I'm now, I guess, transitioning away from that mentality and where Neville is and saying, well, you can create whatever you want. So what exactly defines your best timeline?
Um, so I think he talks a lot about just, you know, searching from what's going on within yourself. So that also kind of ties into like you creating whatever you desire. So, I mean, if there is something inherent within you that you improve, you're going to see your external. Um, and as you know, with the constant and consistent realization and ever evolving awareness of self, you'll continuously see your external reality improve. I get from his stuff. Like, what do you think?
That's actually an interesting take, and I guess it's to be on your best. Well, let's summarize what he kind of says, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the way I guess view what he talks about is he really kind of talks about the duality between the conscious and the subconscious,
Yeah.
and how you're able to take conscious thoughts like you're saying, I want to be better at this, I want to be better at that, and then impose them on your subconscious. He even goes to the extent of going into biblical structures or stories and explaining how that is a representation of the conscious mind versus the subconscious mind, how you're able to become the god of your own reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where I took a step back and was like, whoa, like that's powerful stuff.
It is. Yeah, I actually that was the part that kind of hooked me in because I'll be honest, when I first started like listening to his stuff, I was kind of like, okay, after you've been studying or practicing law of attraction and, you know, creating your own reality for a substantial period of time, you're like, okay, I kind of know this stuff already. But he really hooked me in when he started talking about the duality of the mind, the subconscious, the conscious, and even giving them like such a polarity where he said like the subconscious is really feminine and the conscious mind is really masculine. You know, there your subconscious is more subjective and then your conscious mind is objective. So when he put it in that sort of perspective, wow, that I mean, I knew that, but it was kind of just like a really nice reminder that, you know, out of feminine energy, there are so many things that are created, you know,
Right.
and the masculine energy is just kind of like the container for that. So we sort of have to realize that and remind ourselves of that in our day to day life. We tend to live from our more masculine conscious mind, but what's actually creating that is something that's underneath, which is the feminine subconscious mind. So we all have this polarity energy inside of all of us, and that's just kind of how it's co-creating our entire reality.
And I polarity is obviously like a really fascinating thing because of how many representations that has,
Mm-hmm.
throughout our lives and throughout, stories of biblical structures, relationships, uh, interaction with things. I always find other languages super fascinating because each
Mm-hmm.
word is either masculine or feminine, which
Yeah,
I find just fascinating in its own regard. Whereas, like in English, we don't have that at all.
I know. Yeah, you know, good point. I never realized that, but um, me being somewhat bilingual, I'm not like completely fluent in Spanish. I'm hoping to get there one day. But my, you know, mom's side of the family is from Puerto Rico, so I grew up in that bilingual household, and just knowing that now that you put it that way, that makes so much sense.
Right. And I don't know really what to make of that, the fact that it
Mhm.
is that split among words.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, I guess, because of who you're addressing in the conversation or the context of which polarity you're talking about. Like a lot of times when you're talking about something more feminine, it's going to end with an A, or something more masculine is going to end with an O. So, like, we see that in areas of life. Um, and then just also, like, you know, cultures have like yin yang, or, I mean, there's other ones out there, of course, but that's just one that comes to mind for me. That's always like a really great representation of the polarity. And then also, like, um, each one existing inside, like, the symbol, you see the white with the black symbol in it, and then you see the black with the white symbol in it.
Right. And it has that, and it's fascinating too how in the yin yang, Yin Yang. Is that the correct way to pronounce
Is it
it?
yin yang? I hope I'm not like mispronouncing it. I hear a lot of people say yang, but I do like want to say yang. So I don't
Yang
want to
is how
like
I was
offend.
always.
Yeah. I don't want to
I
offend anybody. I hope I'm not saying it wrong.
send all your hate to me, and I'll parse it out and figure it out. It's my fault for bringing her on. Just messing with you. Let's get it. But yeah, so how they have that, there is still the little bit, even in the like the feminine side of, I think the yin is the yin the feminine, and
Yin,
then
yeah.
the so like even in that feminine, there's still like a speck of masculine kind of
Yep.
within it, and it's interesting how it demonstrates that display of, even I guess the purest feminine still needs a little bit of masculine within it, and likewise with the
Mhm.
masculine. And if we tie
Yeah.
that back to the conscious and subconscious, it's kind of it's really fascinating the way Neville kind of puts displays it, because the way that he kind of uses this manifestation, he uses the conscious to reprogram the subconscious, is he explains how as you're going to bed, you're falling into theta and beta brainwaves. And as you're kind of going down into that trance like state, you are now accessing your subconscious mind. And theoretically, and I believe it, is that, dreams are also a representation of your subconscious mind. There's
Mm.
stories that are being played out to describe something to you about how you see the world or how you interact with the world or are unconsciously aware of the world around you almost.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I find it fascinating how that connection kind of occurs as you're going to bed, um, between the conscious and subconscious. Did you get to that part in his
Yeah.
yeah, in his
Yeah,
teachings of it?
absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I've practiced those teachings. I mean, we talked about it a little bit outside of here, but simple practices just like as you're falling asleep and also while you're waking up too, because you're still going from the subconscious into the conscious as you're waking up. Also, like changing your brainwave state and how that can have such a strong effect on your day to day. I know Neville talks about that a lot too. So it's really just like whatever intentions you're setting prior to going to sleep. And then also while, waking up is going to have such a strong effect on your day to day. Probably one of the most powerful manifestation techniques, in my opinion, because a lot of times I know actually you posted a video on YouTube, I think recently, talking about the water manifestation techniques.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which is also a really great one because water is a symbol for the subconscious. But a lot of these techniques, like we are completely conscious, we're completely in beta brainwave state. So I personally feel like it's not making as strong as an impression as if, we're deeper in our subconscious, like whether we're falling asleep or like in a deep, deep meditative state, or just like in a trance flow state, because we tend to get into those slower brain waves when we're doing something that we feel puts us in that.
Right. And as a precursor to this, something that flashed in my head for those who are unaware, and I think this is a beautiful thing to highlight, that your theta and beta brain waves are like in their highest frequency between the ages of 0 and 7.
Yeah.
And this is kind of when a lot of that, programming kind of happens. And I
Hmm.
was just talking to someone yesterday, and they were saying, like, yeah, like, I kind of believe that, like, we're all kind of this like pure energy that comes in. Then as we're born, we get the layers of like society, language,
Hmm.
cultural norms gets placed on you, and you kind of lose yourself along the way. And
Hmm.
it reminded me exactly of the fact that, you're in this hypnotic state and being impressed from a young age since you're born to kind of have these subconscious patterns ingrained onto you.
Yeah.
And so that's something you don't have any control over, right? But now it's like that whole coming full circle, as, wait, like, you do have that power to be able to rewrite the foundation of your subconscious in order to create kind of whatever type of reality you want around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, like a lot of us, we think about the time where we were like the age of 1 to 7. And if you remember correctly, it kind of feels more dreamlike. Like, you know, you remember bits
Yeah.
and pieces, you remember some parts. And a lot of times when we dream, like that's kind of how it is once we wake up and are more conscious. And I think that's just also leading into like after 7 years old, you're more conscious, therefore you're able to remember more things. But that's also a firm reminder of like your brain is a sponge from that age of 1 to 7. So whatever happens, you know, in that dreamlike reality, in that dreamlike state, is going to make an immediate impression on your subconscious mind. And whatever stories were written for you back then, whatever beliefs were, you know, conditioned or fed to you back then, it's going to have, you know, a really immediate imprint during that age span. So, you know, once you do become more conscious after, you know, 7 years old or so, I still even feel like the age of like 7 to like 14, you're still kind of in this weird place. But even after that, like when you're a teenager, you're starting to get to know yourself a little bit more, be more conscious of yourself. Therefore, I feel like starting the process of self discovery. And then you're able to kind of rewrite some of those beliefs or, you know, kind of question what you expected and whether that feels right to you or whether that resonates or is valid in your experience.
And something I want to highlight that you just said is if it feels right,
Mm-hmm.
because in Neville's teaching, there's a book on it. It's literally called "The Feeling Is the Secret,"
Yep.
and I believe that that's, you know, so indicative of everything that kind of occurs in such a bizarre way because at least for me coming back from an engineering background, I was trained my entire life for all the way through college, 23 some years to use my analytical brain. And it's so wild to realize that, like, you know, although that might be what's physically happening in this three-dimensional world, on a much more real sense, your feelings and your subconscious even is operating in such a more real way to you. Like
Mm-hmm.
whenever you see certain things, you feel a certain way. When you talk to certain people, you feel a certain way. And in a sense, that's almost more real to you than these collective physical things that we've agreed upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just the fact that those feelings and emotions are just like, it's really just almost an energetic signature. And something I always remind myself of is like, these emotions kind of transcend time and space. This kind of this thing that connects us between past, present, and future. Because anytime you feel this feeling of, let's say, sadness, maybe that's linked to a feeling of unworthiness, which is also linked to something of your past or present or future. So when you also realize that emotions and feelings are simply energy signatures that kind of help feed or download things into your reality based off of like what your beliefs are or what you associate that feeling and emotion with, then you can kind of transmute and transform that into like a higher vibrational emotion. So instead of grief or despair, like something more joyful or happy or hopeful. Um, Therefore, you're going to tie in things in the future that align with that emotion or even things in the past too.
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it because there's like that reciprocal nature of, you know, do I think the question is like, do thoughts create emotions or do emotions create thoughts? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like the chicken or the egg kind of
It is.
dilemma.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that cyclical nature, it's like, I guess in the reality of it is it doesn't matter which one happens first. All
Right.
that you need to be conscious of is that when you have one, it creates the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can create this downward spiral of, you know, negative feelings, which create negative thoughts, which create negative feelings, which create negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like that, you know, it becomes that subconscious imprint on you, no matter what it is, no matter what, like, you know, and the strongest emotions are like that shame, guilt, fear. When you feel those, it creates like that negative spiral starting to occur. It's like you start thinking of times you were ashamed, you were
Exactly.
fearful, and then it
Mm-hmm.
reinvokes it as if it's still alive today. And this
Yeah.
is what goes back to what you were saying, where it's yeah, it's still alive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it just because you don't see it in front of you didn't mean that it went away.
Right.
Maybe the danger subsided, but this is the time that you can kind of go in and it's in a way rewrite your own history by
Mm-hmm.
changing that subconscious programming of what happened and how you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Like giving it a different narrative. And that's gonna completely transform like what happens anytime like they're going forward from that like now moment. That's kind of how I look at it too. Um, I was gonna say another thing that you kind of made me think of, but I think I lost it, so I'll probably come back later.
Emotions, thoughts.
Yeah.
uh, well, something that I was thinking of is like how, if everything's happening right now, then there is no, and this is what comes into the whole feeling structure, right? Is we're told there is no past or future. It's all
Mm-hmm.
just now. Like there's the infinite now, and past and future are an essential illusion. And so,
Yes.
therefore, if you're able to, let's say, biohack or hack your subconscious into realizing that right now is that future. I have that car. I have that laptop. I have that
Mm-hmm.
money. I have that relationship. Then you can live as if it's already happening, which makes it occur in your external reality.
Yep. Exactly. And Neville talks a lot about like, you know, I don't know if you got to this part or like this really resonated with you, but not so much like thinking of the end, but thinking from the end
Yeah.
and just feeling how it would feel when you have that car. Like literally putting yourself in the state of mind, putting yourself in that moment, even of like, what do your seats feel like? What color is the interior? What color is the exterior? Like, picture yourself grabbing the handle, getting into the car, sitting in it, feeling the wheel. Like all of those physical sensations and emotions that you would feel put you in that moment technically because there is no past, present, or future. And
Right.
then you automatically like create that energy signature for yourself that just attracts it to you like more and more and at a faster and more rapid rate. With repetition, and even if you like go to sleep doing this every single day or wake up doing this every single day, it's like such a powerful powerful thing because you then not only start to think as if you're this person with this car, but you're being as if you're this person with this car.
Right. And what you're touching on, and this might be a key distinction for people that are going to be researching this or looking this up, is what we were talking about at the beginning was like the law of attraction. And then what this is and what he has kind of laid out is the law of assumption. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like that assumption of already being where you want to be, right? It's like if you want a new car, don't don't think about having a new car, assume you already have it, and think about that first, like oil change is kind of the way
Yep.
that he would describe that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I even do certain things to just kind of play with it and have fun with it and put myself in that more childlike mind state. So even if you like draw out the symbol of the car that you want and you put it on the steering wheel, so when you're looking at your steering wheel, you don't see your old car logo, you see the new one. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that, even though it's a little bit more playful, it's still imprinting on your subconscious, and your subconscious is believing like, oh, this is my car because
All
it's in
right.
make believe, it's in dreamland, it's in like that age of 1 to 7 when you were 5 years old and you were doing stuff like that and you fully believe that you were driving that car at 5 years old.
No, and I have a perfect personal example. There's a so he tells you to create like a scene, in your
Yep.
mind of like what you envision. And I don't want to go into the specifics about this particular thing that I'm trying to cultivate, but I created that scene, and then like you're saying, I even like kind of drew in my notebook like a couple pictures that would have occurred in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I shit you not, literally 2 days ago, I've been working on this for 4 days. 2 days ago, I saw that exact picture on somebody's timeline on my Instagram story.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
That's so cool.
I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like what he talks about is almost like the key to manifesting. It seems like
Mm-hmm.
this is what everyone's trying to point to, but he's highlighted like the most I don't want to say scientific because he doesn't go into it, but the most logically like available thing that we have almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think if you want to look at it from a science perspective, you're probably going to look more at like Dr. Joe Dispenza when he talks about like breaking the habit of being yourself or like becoming supernatural because he has a lot of science to back it up. Neville kind of comes from a more it's like mystic, but it's also something that sort of just makes sense and it is logical if you're one of those people that is constantly questioning these things in your head but has never found the answers because another thing is like those answers aren't necessarily going to come from outside of yourself all the time. There are instances that, the universe kind of throws these things at you or like puts you in these um coincidental places. Coincidental, I don't really believe in coincidences, but um the answer's always found within yourself and your desires are found within yourself. Anything that ever is experienced, I feel like, is related to that because we're all just here sort of remembering things.
Right, which is crazy, right? Because and this kind of goes to the next step of what I was gonna actually bring up at some point was, if he describes the subconscious essentially as God, and I have kind of even extrapolated that further, that it even goes to prove that we all are God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've maybe gotten a little bit in trouble over the holidays by kind
Uh-oh,
of
you had
telling my parents that I am God.
There's like, okay, who's this
Yeah.
guy?
Like, damn, like come down your egotistical horse a little bit there. It's like no, but I not just me, it's like you guys are too.
Yeah.
And it's so it's fascinating that the chain of events that happens, right? It's like there's almost a proclivity to resist that. It's like
Mm-hmm.
there's this sense of like almost not wanting to believe that you could hold so much power within yourself to rewrite the course of your own history and the history almost of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I I guess a part of me has kind of been, messing around with this idea, and at a level of it is I completely get it. Like it's a scary thought to fathom. Like the thought that you could change any aspect of your reality that you choose. I mean, that becomes like a very difficult problem to handle. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're in
Absolutely.
because we are imperfect creatures, and it, arguably the idea of perfect is impossible. Well, I guess it depends how you look at that, but
Yeah.
having to take on that massive responsibility, I mean, it becomes a daunting task. And if you're told that you can fix everything, maybe that's why people have a tendency to push away from that idea.
Yeah. Or self-sabotage. Some people do that as well. Do
Well,
you think
I
that
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say like self sabotage is an interesting thing, right? It's like,
Yeah.
eh, is it your subconscious? Like, say that you want a certain car, right? Say your dream car, and everything's lined up for you to get it, and you quote unquote self sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, is it a limiting belief that caused you to do that? Or is that just not really the car that you really want? You really want something else?
I mean, oof, that's that can go so many different. I think it is really depending on the person and, you know, I guess what their life direction is. Because some people could really be set on, like, I want this car. This is my dream car. This is my desire. I think if it's coming from a place of lack or this will make me happy, that's when it starts to become like, maybe I didn't really want this car,
And I
because
think,
happiness comes from within you. Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's a perfect point. And even just in kind of like the way that that's phrased, right, is I want this. Saying that you want
Mm-hmm.
something implies that you don't have it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that kind of is that transformation of like the, what is it, the law of attraction into the law of assumption.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people I think we kind of start out our spiritual journey sometimes with the law of attraction just because it's more mainstream now. Um, but I think the law of assumption is really key. Like that's where it's at
Yeah.
because the law of attraction is sort of painted of like, you attract whatever you desire. What you want is already yours. This, that, and third. But you kind of have to come from it of perspective that what I desire is already mine. It's already here. And the only thing that is disconnecting me or misaligning me from that desire is me and how I feel, my thoughts, beliefs, and emotions at this now present moment. So I take time out of it, take relativity of certain things out of it.
Which this now I don't expect you to have the question the answer to this, but just as a thought experiment, right? If we're able to impact our subconscious mind at such a level, I guess, and maybe I'm already answering my question in my head, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. You still need to allow for three-dimensional linear time to kind of orientate almost the universe to present you with that item. Like if I
Yeah.
fully believe in these certain things, like time still becomes a factor of almost aligning everything else to get it there. Is
Yeah.
How do you view that?
Uh I have a different view. I think if you would have asked me that question maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, A plus B equals C. But
Yeah.
now I come from it, or I come at it from this perspective of you can get from A to C, and B could not even be included if that's not what's supposed to happen along your journey. Um, because we also kind of get caught up in time, and we have to remember that time is technically a limitation in this 3D reality for us. If we were living as like from this 4D, 5D perspective, time would not even be relative. So if we have to, how should I put this? I'm sorry, hold
It's all good.
on. Sorry, I'm having a hard grounding myself lately, to be honest. I've been receiving so many downloads and so much has been happening in my sleep that I'm like up here. So I don't know if you've noticed in this conversation, I've had to constantly like come back down to reality. But okay, I got it back now. Sorry.
It's
So
okay.
you if you have a desire for something and you're living from the law of assumption, you have to take time as a limitation out of the equation because you cannot worry about how or when something's going to happen for you. That's only going to keep you from your manifestation. It's creating resistance, you
Right.
know, because you could have this thing made up in your head of like, oh, this is how it's going to happen. And that could be a limiter in itself. The time restriction that you're putting on it, I actually had this conversation with my boyfriend the other day. He's getting really like into crypto and he's making NFTs and stuff now. And he's like, well, maybe like 5 years from now, I'll build up a team and I'll be good enough to do this. And I would have mastered it enough to get to this point. And I'm like, why are you limiting yourself like that? You could get to that point a year from now. You can get to that point 6 months from now. You could be a master at it already. And you are putting a cap and a glass ceiling on yourself by thinking of it in terms of time. So I think
Right.
we just have to take the when and the hows out of our manifestations, and I think that's why it's also so powerful to just like, thinking from the end, or making a vision board and just having fun with stuff like that, and not really worrying about that how and when, but just knowing that this is what I desire and this is already mine as long as aligning my thoughts, feelings, emotions, and vibration with that, and I'm being as if.
And that's a really good point because I'll bring it to a personal example. It's that idea of being a good podcast host. It's like, whenever I've, let's say, looked at or hear other people speak, you hear these self limiting beliefs of, because when you're in this space of trying to do what you do, you hear all the positive as well as all the negative. Like, it's so hard to be a YouTube producer. It's so hard to be a podcast host. It's takes at least 30 episodes for you to hit your stride with podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind always flicks to is like, okay, that's a limiting belief.
Yeah.
Like that you're just setting like a 3D marker for that kind of progression you're looking for.
Mhm.
And to wrap it back to Neville, it's like, no, it's like, I am the best podcast interviewer of all time already.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
am that. Like it doesn't, there is no time for this to need to occur. And to go back to your A plus B equals C, if I'm a math geek, but B is allowed to equal zero, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
even,
Good point.
so you are able to, you can bridge that gap instantaneously. It's just that predic- predicated. It's that, it's that limiting belief of just how, and that's what comes crazy. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling here, but that's what is so amazing when you kind of listen to people and the way they speak is, oh yeah, it really takes 7 years to build a business. Oh yeah, it really takes this much time to get this much income.
Mhm.
It's like, how much of that, I mean, it's just, to me, so much of it has to be a limiting belief of, what it takes. And I've even heard, like, there was times along my journey where, like, right now well, I probably shouldn't say that out loud because it's not
Too much.
well, I what I was gonna say is, like, over the past, let's say, few months, I haven't had an income, and I don't want to say that out loud. I didn't want to say that out
Right.
loud to make
You don't
it
want to like
real.
manifest that for your
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's just I am already making the $12,000 a month that I want, but the point I'm trying to get at here is, like, as I was kind of saying that, and whenever I've talked to people, it's like, oh well, why don't you just get like a part-time job before blah blah blah, and it's like something has always just
But
clicked
don't
with me
do
as
it.
like,
It sucks.
it sucks. Right, we should be doing what we love, right? All this is just play and for fun.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Yes.
also, I mean, money's another huge thing that I think a lot of people play with in terms of like law of attraction, law of assumption, and you also have to think about all of these things in a different state of mind in a different context. I'm seeing a lot of light orbs right now. Jesus Christ. Sorry.
Do
This
it.
is kind of like hard for me to like concentrate sometimes because they're all just like, hello. Um, so in terms of money, like you just have to think about it as also this is an energetic exchange, and you're putting so much energy into like your podcasts. And so the energy that you're pouring out into this, you deserve to also get poured into and overflowed with a monetary abundance.
Right. And so it's just that providing, right? It's just providing that
Hmm.
value. How are you able to help? Can you help here? Can you help there? And that's kind of what my fundamental belief has always been, is just like, keep providing, and at some point the universe is going to be like, all right, here you go, like,
Yeah.
I'll take care of you, like, here's what you've been looking for, and here's what you need.
Yeah. Have you in terms of like these things that we're talking about, aside from going to sleep and doing the visualization manifestations and stuff, have you done any other things to like transform your limiting beliefs just like based off of what Neville talks about, or other ways that work for you?
That's a good question, and I kind of have the same question for you, but the one thing that I notice is, like, throughout my day, I'll catch myself having, like, the limiting beliefs will creep in, or negative thoughts, and I'll be very quick to catch them and rewrite them and be like, no,
Hmm.
no, 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 that's not what's happening. Like,
Yeah.
something will happen. It's like, no, that's not what's currently happening. There's a he has a, I'm not sure which book's it in, but he's got plenty of people with case studies, and the one person said that his whole visualization was a specific, like, record, music record,
Hmm.
and he, like, visualized himself going into a store owner, being like, hey, do you have this, him saying yes, him giving it to him walking out the door.
Mm.
And he said that whenever he went in there, so in the reality of it, he went in and he said to the owner, um, what is, or do you have this record? And he said no. And as he turned away, internally he said to himself, that's not what you said. And saw that there was a poster kind of hanging up, like, on top of a book thing, for the record itself. And so he turned
Mm.
back to the guy and he's like, hey, like, if you don't have the record, you should take this down. And the guy's like, yeah, you're right. And he goes to grab it, and it's actually the record itself.
Wow. See,
And
it
he's
didn't
like,
happen the way he thought it was how it was gonna happen.
the how, you can't focus on the how, right?
Hmm. I
But
mean,
it's
it's great to think about it in detail like he did, I think, but go
well,
ahead.
and
I won't cut you
it's
off.
that persistence. No, you're good. It's that persistence, right? It's that,
Yeah.
like, when you have those limiting beliefs come in, when you have those little inklings of, well, but it's like, no, you have to shut that off, and you have to just be as if it is. The assumption, assuming that it already is. You are where you
Hmm.
already need to be, and everything's kind of already flowing in that direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do
So
you
have you,
sorry, go ahead.
so have you done like anything outside of, or have you, let's say, kind of tailored his things in a certain way for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of different manifestation techniques. I really notice the biggest difference and try to focus on what I call like shadow work, but I know a lot of people have a different definition for that for themselves. But I mean, I like to work with the moons and the full moons. We've talked about this too, but just setting an intention for myself for that entire moon cycle or that entire month that this is the belief I'm working on. These are the manifestation techniques that I'm going to work on with this. And I do notice like pretty immediate results. So I know that there's actually a new moon tomorrow. And I always base it off of like what's going on astrologically in my chart. And that's like a whole nother thing. But you can base it off of that. You can base it off of what chakra, you can base it off of, what you want your end result to be and what limiting belief you believe is blocking you from that or keeping you from that and working on that for 28 days or one moon cycle. And I think, like you said, with the persistence of that and the consistency of that, you'll notice changing factors in your external reality like pretty rapidly. I notice it sometimes within 1 or 2 days.
That's
It's
crazy.
crazy.
And something I kind of wanted to bring up to you about this, because we talked a little bit, I think, about the moon thing in the first episode. But so with this understanding that we all are God, and that we are all, this our subconscious is God. Let's say, I don't want to say like we are, because that implies our physical body as well, but our subconscious is God. Therefore, and I'm taking this to an astral place of, well, then is, I feel like I'm starting to see the separation of like Sagittarius, Aries, Gemini, Aquarius. Is that not just a form of division that then kind of separates you a little bit more, or fractures you from that initial power of source?
I think it could sometimes. And I'll be honest with you, like I got really really deep into my studies like throughout like quarantine when we first quarantined and like that whole entire year after that. And I would say within the last 6 months, I haven't even done any readings, haven't dug much into like the transits. Like when people ask me questions and stuff, of course, I'll give them all of the knowledge I know and I have, but I haven't been as like consistent with it as I used to be. And I think it's to look at it from that division, and it was limiting me as well. And I was kind of forgetting, like I kind of fell into this darker place, I would say, for the past 6 months, and I'm kind of coming out of it now. And just with full complete transparency and like authenticity here, I was really believing like, well, everything's faded anyway, like who cares, you know what I mean? Like I kind of started to fall into this thought pattern of like I don't have control over what happens to me, and things are destined, things are fated, it's already like fate and free will are one and the same, so why am I even doing all of this stuff anymore? And I had to remind myself of that. And we were talking about the alchemist at one point outside of the podcast one day, and you mentioned when they mentioned in the book, like I think the biggest, I forgot how they put it, but basically the biggest like con or the biggest mislead in life is that you are not the creator of your reality and you are not the creator of your own universe. And for some reason, that just like made me snap back out of it. And I was like, okay, sure, fate and free will could be one and the same still, but free really, really special thing that we have as human beings that I think is so underrated. And we can use that and manipulate that to our ability, not in the bad way, but ever studied Dolores Cannon, she talks about how we came here as human beings to learn how to manipulate energy, whatever that may
Okay,
be. So even
that's
if
trippy.
there, yeah, so like even if there is something that's fated for you that maybe is not to your best favor, you can still manipulate that energy somehow. You can manipulate the energy signature of that and rewrite that story, or um, change your point of view and perspective and look at it from, what is this teaching me? What am I learning from this? Go within yourself. Like it gets pretty deep, but again, I'm still coming out of it now because I'm not sure why I kind of fell into that thought pattern. But I think it had a really strong purpose for me personally, and just that, free will is way more powerful than we even can perceive yet.
Right. And I think that even expands onto the human as being so powerful.
Yeah.
Do you think that connects kind of to what I was saying earlier with the like having that free will of infinity, of being able to create anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you ever watched the Matrix series or watched the latest Matrix. Have you
Just
seen?
just watch the newest one that came out
Me
2
too.
weeks ago. Is
Yeah,
it spoiler alert?
I don't want to drop any spoilers, but that was a really good reminder of it, because some of my favorite scenes are those with the Oracle, and I know that there weren't many in the last movie, but if you really pay attention to what they're saying, they are dropping so many like truth bombs of what the universe is and how like the Matrix or this reality of ours works.
Right. No, I remember realizing that in the first one. Like I remember rewatching it maybe I think I probably rewatched it actually when I was in Brazil, and it really like it really shows you that the what's the word I'm looking for here? That the illusion that's kind of in this whole three-dimensional grasp 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 of reality. It's like
Yeah.
we're thrown in here, the veil's kind of pulled over our eyes, and we're almost fighting our entire lives to pull it away and to see the
Mhm.
world for what it actually is.
Yeah, that's so true.
And
Absolutely.
and I guess the even further thing is that you're fighting against the machine. You're fighting against that veil. You're fighting against every person who has, said or who has still not seen past the veil that you are the creator, and
Mhm.
that it and it's fascinating too because it's like it's that same idea of, if you like the whole I am God concept, it's like when you try to wake up people to that idea and they're not ready for it, they're going to push back against you. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and that parallels outlined within the matrix itself.
Yeah, and that God is not something outside of yourself. Like, you are inherently God. And I think a lot of that thought also scares people. I don't know about you, but I think sometimes I witness people like almost like shudder at that sort of thing.
It scares me myself. I mean, I it's hard for me still, and I'm coming around to it, but when you're the creator of everything, when everything is a result of your interpretation of the world, like that's a heavy burden to kind of bear. I mean, obviously you can heal from it, you can figure it out, we get to have fun with it at a certain
Yeah.
point, but I still catch myself in lasps lasping back sometimes to like, I get it. I get why this is scary for people to believe that they're able to create the reality that they want to create.
It's
I
very
mean,
much red pill, blue pill sort of experience.
it's the whole, yeah, once you see it, you can't go back. Like
Mhm.
it's so true because it's even if you want to go back, it's like, well, do you really like
Mhm.
it? It's so difficult in those regards. Do you find yourself catching yourself in those like same thought patterns, or is it mostly in other people at this point?
No, absolutely. I'm still human. Like like I said, for that 6 months when I was sort of just falling into this fate free will sort of battle within myself, I don't want to say I forgot I was like the god of my own universe, because I didn't really forget. I think I was just having a hard time like understanding and grasping how they can still be one and the same, and I can still make whatever I want happen with my free will because it's that powerful.
They're still one and the same. Sorry, I think I zoned out a little bit there.
No, it's
Can you
okay.
repeat
That
that?
I mean, even what I just said is still kind of hard for me to even I keep trying to change my neurolinguistic programming here. So I keep saying understand because it's something that you have to understand from within. You know, this is it's kind of like one of those epiphanies that you'll have that you almost like can't put into words. But
Okay.
there can still be two truths even if they do sound as if they're like contradicting each other. So fate and free will can be one and the same, and you can still make whatever you want happen with your free will because it's that powerful.
Right. You're almost, what it sounds like is you're breaking out of even that binary. And if you attach
Yeah.
this to like the Matrix, it's like, well, you could take the blue pill, you could take the red pill, you could take both, or don't have to take either, or you could take
Mm-hmm.
half of one, or you could take half of that one. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, a huge, like, kind of, and that splinters to infinity, essentially.
Yeah. And basically, like every possible outcome, if you think about it from that sense, whoops, every possible outcome can be true and can be happening at the same time. Therefore, there is no time. Um, and every single thing is possible. Like, I don't know if you've ever experienced deja vu where, and it kind of happens in the Matrix sometimes where he's like, something's different, like he experienced that moment and he thought it was going to play out one way, but then there was one distinct thing that made that moment different that made it have an entirely different outcome. And this has happened to me before, like in waking reality, where I'm like, oh, I've experienced this before, I'm having deja vu, but that woman wasn't standing there, or but this wasn't this color, you know and that sort of helps you understand that there can be parallel realities of this one now moment, and it's simply like whatever now moment you're aligning yourself with.
So do you think that whenever you had that deja vu moment, you were having a different thought? Could you expand a little bit more on that?
Sure, yeah. So I would say I wasn't necessarily having a different thought, but I was more aware.
Okay.
So the only times I've ever experienced this, thankfully enough, I feel like we're in a higher timeline. That's the only feeling I can kind of tune into at that point, because every time I've experienced this sort of deja vu, it's when something bad is supposed to happen, and I kind of feel that for a split second. But then I notice, or I'm like more aware of not only myself and my internal um, dialogue, but also aware of the external and what's different there. And then that, maybe negative event doesn't necessarily happen. So let's say this woman, I was at a coffee shop and this woman was supposed to spill coffee in herself at that moment, because that's kind of how I remember it. But then I noticed instead of a hot coffee, she got an iced coffee. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's we're in a different now moment. We're in a different parallel reality now because of her free will choice, or maybe because of my free will choice to become more aware of that moment. It's still a really trippy thing to break down, and it's still hard for me to even grasp because it happens to you in the moment and you're kind of just like, what? What just happened? Um but as I was watching The Matrix, there was one scene, I forget which movie it was because I watched the entire series just so I could like watch the fourth one, and he says at a certain point, like, something's like, this happened before, but something's different. And I'm like, oh, I felt that, like what he was saying. And there was another scene where he was talking to the Oracle, which also kind of put things into perspective for me, and she said we can't see past the choices we don't understand. So if I'm not understanding a certain choice in that moment, whether that be my choice, somebody else's choice, I can't see past that sort of now moment.
As in, you can't So that I do remember her saying that, but
Hmm.
I guess I never really understood what it meant. Right? So it's if you're not sure why you make a choice, you're not
Hmm.
sure then what the outcome of that choice is. Is that the crux of it?
I would say yes, because again, you have to really pay close attention to her scenes, and I even kind of want to go back and rewatch them to really like get them to soak in, and I can understand the
Find an
concept of
oracle
it.
montage.
Yeah, exactly, on YouTube. Find the Oracle montage on YouTube from the Matrix. Um, but when she's talking to Neo, knows already the choices that he's making. Like when she offers him a piece of candy and he's like, "Well, you already know if I took it or not," you know?
Yeah.
Um, but she is choosing to give him the piece of candy, and it's like, what if she never made that choice to give that to him? With her free will, that puts her in an entirely different timeline, that puts her in an entirely different reality. And that's how with the fact that like so fate can still be a thing and it could be still a true reality, but maybe it's not this reality, maybe it's not this timeline because of the free will choice that you made at that moment. And if you can't see past that free will choice, like the purpose of you making it, then you won't really know what's to come of it. And I think that's why Neo, like, he's presented with these choices at these points in the movie, and he doesn't know why he's making the choice yet, but he's making the choice that feels right to him and feels best, and that's putting him in the best possible outcome of that choice.
And I guess that's what kind of comes back to the whole feeling is the secret thing,
Yeah,
right?
and you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you might not know why you're making that choice in that moment, but as long as you feel like you're making the right choice for you, or what feels inherently best for you and your higher self, let's just say, like if you're making the highest choice for yourself in terms of, let's say, moral, in terms of belief, in terms of love, and not these lower vibrational thoughts, feelings, and emotions, then although you don't know what the outcome is going to be because you can't see past the choice, you can just trust that that outcome or that timeline is a higher timeline only because you chose the higher choice.
So then how does this connect to, let's say I choose a certain outcome that I want in podcasting or in a relationship or with money? How, because I choose to create that reality as I fall asleep, is the point though that as I fall asleep, as I wake up, I'm sinking my subconscious mind into this outcome that I desire?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that we don't, here's where I'm trying to like kind of connect the dots is you have to, there are choices that are made in between there. You know,
Yeah.
do I get out of bed with my left foot? Do I get out of bed with my right foot? Do I,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? All the way through
Yeah.
the list. Is it that setting, you have a choice of what you're going to set your external reality to be?
Mm-hmm.
Is the next step that you need to make the decisions that feel the most right in between there? Although you don't know what the outcome is, it's just that you know that with your feeling that you're going to get to that place of what you're attempting to manifest.
That Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I guess that's how I believe it to be right now, because those choices seem so small, but from a grander scope of things, that literally puts you in a different timeline, technically speaking. So, um, I think you kind of just have to trust and have faith. I know Neville Goddard talks a lot about faith too.
Right.
So, if you have faith in the choices that you make and in the knowing that you are making the best choice, or you are making the choices that will align you with that end uh, goal, then you can only assume, law of assumption again, that it will eventually put you there. And again, you don't know how many choices you're going to have to make. You don't know when you're going to have to make these choices. So you're taking the hows and the whens out of it again. But you are trusting and you're having faith that in the knowing that this is already yours, or that you're already there at that end moment.
It's that you're making those decisions purely out of your emotional, and that's what's weird, right? Because you're making these choices out of an emotional state.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
almost, go ahead.
Like an emotional guidance system. That's kind of how I think about it in my head. Like it's like a navigation system.
Right. Yeah, because I think there's at least a cultural stigma associated with the concept of, well, don't make decisions when you're emotional. But maybe it's
Mhm.
more, don't make decisions out of like lower emotional vibrations,
Right.
such
Yeah.
as fear, guilt, shame.
Yeah, because that can get very chaotic very quickly. Because you're basically emotion is energy in motion. So any emotional choice that you make is going to have momentum behind it. So you have to remember that too. So if you are feeling a lower vibrational emotion and you probably shouldn't make a choice in that moment because it's going to have more momentum behind it that leads to more lower vibrational things, like wait until you're at a more neutral state of mind or wait until you're even a little bit better than that so that it has a little bit better momentum to back you up.
As in making these incremental steps of like, okay, well, this feels just a little bit better than this does, right?
Yeah, or even just like I'm kind of thinking at it from this point of, say you got an argument with somebody and you're kind of in this like tug of war of like I should text them this or call them or tell them off, or I probably should just stay silent until I feel a little bit better so that I don't say anything I regret, or um you know because both of those choices have momentum behind them. So you telling them off might lead to this huge argument. You're both going to say things that you regret. You excuse me, you may get into such a bad argument with somebody that you may not even speak to them ever again. And that's the momentum and the energy behind this emotional choice that you made. And then the other emotional choice is, you guys reconciling eventually, realizing that you misunderstood each other or maybe there was miscommunication. You're taking your egos out of it and they're no longer involved, and then that the momentum of that choice actually is concluded with you guys having an even better relationship than you did before with this person.
Through understanding the reasons and rationale that they made the choices that they made
Yeah.
outside of this emotional state.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. That's pretty cool. Yeah, because it's kind of feels like, just, and this is what comes back to the feeling of it, is that if you're putting your feeling in that, or constantly trying to bring it up, right, to kind of this more emotional state, then it's bringing you to that higher timeline, as we were saying.
Mhm. Yeah, because I mean, everything in life is energy, frequency, and vibration. So our emotions have energy signatures. They're just vibrating at a certain point. And I don't know if I think it's the Hawkins scale of like your emotions and the vibrational
Yep.
frequencies of them. And they're literally placed at like almost like a point system of grief is down here at this, point, and then happiness is up here. So thankfully, I feel like even the higher vibrational emotions also have like increasingly better momentum behind them because that manifestation just comes much easier to us because we are that of light and love and higher vibrations rather than lower vibrations. But you just kind of have to remember that whatever vibrational frequency you want to be on, you have to stay with that signature if it's leading to a certain end moment that you desire. So even if let's go back to the car. Let's say you're sitting in your car and the feeling that you're experiencing is satisfaction rather than a feeling of regret. Regret is a lower vibrational frequency. Satisfaction or success is a higher vibrational frequency. So you have to kind of do the math on a daily basis with your choices and like what choice is higher, what choice is in aligning you with that higher timeline constantly.
Right. It's almost finding ways to continuously put yourself in that higher vibration.
Yeah. Even like not even just with black and white choices because I feel like we're like very yin yang right now and like very binary in the terms of what we're talking about, but even just doing certain activities or certain daily habits is like really really important.
Such as,
So like when you wake up in the morning and you do things like, say, I know you have like a really solid routine, which is amazing, but maybe somebody does like their yoga, their daily meditation, and then they have like a breakfast that, just sets the tone for their day, puts them in a solid vibrational set point that has momentum behind it for their entire day to flow right. And then on like the upside or the downside of it, let's just say they woke up and their alarm went off really really late, so they didn't have time to do their yoga, they didn't have time to do their meditation, and then they had to like grab a quick like grab and go breakfast. There's a certain vibrational set point behind that, and there's certain momentum behind that, and that's going to change the entire trajectory for that person's day.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. It's like, how you start is it like gets that momentum like you were saying earlier. It kind of gets that momentum rolling such in that positive direction
Yeah.
towards that goal.
Yeah. And, you have to think about the person that you want to be and what kind of daily habits and daily quote unquote choices they make. And you have to start making them.
Like what it as if you are them. All right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. You have to be that person. Like,
Right.
something I've noticed in myself recently is, I think I told you when we were talking prior to like scheduling the podcast, but I've been going to sleep with the narrative that I intend to wake up in my highest optimal timeline or my best timeline. And then when I wake up, I awake in my best, highest optimal timeline as well. I saw it on like a TikTok, so I just started playing with it. And I changed the wording up a little bit because the best possible timeline. And I think that sometimes we can limit ourselves with possibilities. And um we kind of have this like silent narrative of our in our head of like, okay, well, this is impossible for me, or this is possible for me. And I like to think in terms of like nothing's impossible, so I kind of changed the wording up a little bit. Um but as I've been doing that, I mean, I told you literally the next day, I work a part-time job right now, but I randomly got $100 bill from like a person that just comes in very regularly, like all the time. And I was literally doing what was in my job description. Like I did nothing special for this person. And she was just like kind enough. And she's like, you know what? Thank you for always keeping me on schedule. Thank you for always keeping me on time and giving me the right dates and times to come to my appointments. Here's $100. Merry Christmas. What? I was
So
doing this for
amazing.
like 1 or 2 days, you
Yeah.
know?
And
So that happened. And then also like as a result of me going to sleep and waking up saying that, I noticed that I started to really step into this version of myself where I've been setting more solid boundaries with people, because I had this like um shadow self aspect of people pleasing, which a lot of us have.
got
And
it myself.
yeah, it's a killer. It sucks. And when you start to become aware of it, it's like such a hard pattern to break. um
Yeah.
but for some reason lately, I've been a version of myself of really setting these boundaries, like confidently, compassionately, clearly, concisely with people, consciously, and like it feels so good. And I kind of sat back and thought to myself, like, where is this coming from? I feel like this happened overnight. But I think it's really just a like a cause and effect of me stepping into my higher timeline with that intention that I had. And sorry, I know you're gonna say something. I kind of cut you off, so go ahead.
No, that was it. I gotcha. It's no, it's a good to reiterate and to keep, kind of showing how it works in those examples.
Hmm.
And where our conversation kind of went, and this is what I kind of want to ask you, is in the terminology of my highest timeline, does that, to me, it feels like it kind of absolves you from creating what you want, or maybe not what you want, but your choice as to what that looks like. Does that
I see
make
what you're saying.
does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah.
Do you, I
Um,
guess, do you feel that way about it? Because when you say my highest timeline, it's very open ended.
it
For all
could be,
you
yeah,
know, you could be, you could start working as somebody who feeds, the homeless, which, all power to those people. But if that's
yeah.
not what drives you and motivates you, and you would rather be, somewhere else, let's say, I feel like that leaves it almost up to somebody else to decide what determines your highest timeline. And with our determination of your subconscious being God and you're the
Hmm.
creator of your reality, does that kind of almost absolve you of that power in a sense?
I see what you're saying, and it's definitely a good point. I think it really depends on the context that you give it and what you claim as your highest timeline. So I have this um, silent, like, run in my head of what my highest timeline looks like. So um, I personally don't feel like it cuts me off or limits me from obtaining anything other than what I desire. But if, Neville Goddard also talks about like whatever you believe is going to be true. So if somebody else thinks like, well, highest timeline could be anything, it's like any possibility, and they're not okay with that, then you just have to like simply reword it to something that like resonates more strongly with you, or even, simply if you just don't want to put it in words at all and just think about it in terms of like visualization or emotion and like what you're feeling at that end goal or that end result or how you want to feel every day. I think it's going to have the same amount of like power in my head. Like, have you tried anything like that like resonates with you?
Well, I think what you said there kind of, made it kind of answer the question is that you have
Hmm.
already defined what your highest timeline is. You've already
Hmm.
defined what that is. And now you've kind of just associated, I guess, a phrase that resonates the most with you as to
Yeah.
as to just feeling into all those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Because,
go ahead. Sorry.
well, I was going to say that, like, for personally, every morning, every night, well, not every night, but every morning I at least write, out the whole, let's say, script of, where I'm at financially with the podcast, relationshiply, all those different things.
Right.
And so I guess if I were to sit down and kind of cultivate that scene like Neville did, might be a little bit more difficult because I'd be running like through a whole day in the life, so to speak,
Yeah.
versus just having your own, excuse me, like your own, what do you want to call it? Your own phrase that you can just go to. Like I'm in my highest timeline. I am in the, future that is for me. I am in, all of these things being checked off at the same time.
Hmm.
Is that kind of how you, I guess, see it a little bit more, or maybe that's how I'm interpreting it?
I would say so. Yeah. Like, I think the scripting is also a really good point, because a lot of people do use that as a manifestation technique, and they'll script to like the utmost detail of what they want their life to look like, and then they'll read that every night or every morning, which is also a really powerful tool. Um, I have tried that. I don't really do it as much. It's just not something that resonates with me personally as much. I kind of like to set it in terms of like simple affirmations that I can affirm myself every morning, every night, throughout the day. And it kind of is sort of like an umbrella term, but it's something that I've given such a powerful definition to that like I know what it means for me. So
Gotcha.
yeah, like if I kind of had to put it in simplest terms, that's sort of what it is.
Okay. And so it's okay. Yeah, because I guess I wanted to, bridge that gap between just my highest timeline. Because when you kind of say that, it kind of, and maybe this is a good wrap up on our conversation from the episode 3 or 2,
Too,
where,
yeah.
yeah, where it was like, oh, well, like my highest timeline, but there needs to be some concrete, like, thing kind of below that
Yeah.
almost, where it's like my highest timeline feels like the feminine aspect of it where it's just is it's chaotic is
Hmm.
versus you need that masculine, like, well, my highest timeline includes this
Yeah.
this and that.
Yeah, like the container and what holds that feminine creation. And I think what also helps is I have my vision board like right next to my bed almost. So I kind of see it when I wake up, I kind of see it when I go to sleep. Um and so just sometimes seeing that, and I know my subconscious mind is like taking constant notes of that as well. Um that's just sort of the context that I give it. So I think everybody needs to like kind of give that higher self or that higher timeline some sort of context so that you kind of know what you're aligning with. There's some sort of direction there, and it's giving it a container, that masculine energy. But your subconscious is still creating it. You're also still being assisted by the universe as well because it conspires in your favor. But you know, leaving things kind of open ended does sort of lead to any sort of possible outcome. So I think that's also the importance of like solid masculinity.
Is to be able to give you that sense of direction.
Yeah, that sense of security, direction, safety, that is what masculine energy is. And I think it might be a little probably easier for men to do this just because they have that natural energy within them. Sometimes a lot of women are just very go with the flow and they don't have as much of a direction, or maybe they don't know what they run into. A lot of women, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but like some of my friends even are like, I want to be super happy and successful and I want to have a purpose in life, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what I want to do. And I think it's like you have to sort of think a little bit more from the conscious mind of that in that sense and figure out, you know, what experience, outer experience is linked to that feeling that you want to have.
Right. I think there's two things that come to mind are the first one is self-awareness of,
Mm-hmm.
what do you enjoy doing? Where do you find yourself in those highest vibrations of communication or like doing? And for me
Yeah.
personally, it's I found myself in high, vibrations, high vibes whenever I was having like very meaningful one-on-one conversations. And
Right.
so over time I was like, well, what do you do with that? It's like you record it and put it out there for everyone to hear.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first thing. And the other thing is probably getting out of, if you don't know, it's to me, it sounds like, and I'm sure everybody's different on this. To me, it sounds like they're coming from a place of fear or maybe shame, guilt, a lower vibration in a sense where maybe they have, blockages that are preventing them from seeing the bigger picture. They have those stories that they've told themselves about themselves. Um, and it's just so deeply ingrained that maybe they need to go to bed thinking, I am doing what I love, even as abstract as that may be,
Yeah.
that will lead them to finding what they do love doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, like another affirmation that kind of made me think of is I am paid to be me. And I think a lot
Okay.
of entrepreneurs should really like sit with that and use that affirmation a bit more constant because I mean, essentially the conversations that you have are coming from you. They're coming from your personality. Like, you're this masculine container of the direction of where these conversations are going and stuff. And you're just being you. And so
Right.
I actually did a manifestation technique last night from a more financial point of view. I got like a bunch of checking deposit slips from my bank. I initially went there with the intention to get like an actual check. It was like another TikTok manifestation technique I saw for the year of 2022. And it was like one bank teller in there and she was busy. And then there was like another person waiting in line. But I saw these checking deposit slips and I was like, okay, I'll just grab one. But then I ended up grabbing four. So I'm like, I don't know what made me do that. But I broke it down to each quarter of the year and exactly how much I wanted to deposit for each of those quarters. And it's just increasingly getting bigger. Slept with it under my pillow. My bank account numbers on there and everything. So it's real. It's physical in my head. But what I also did was like in all the empty spaces of this checking deposit slip, I put abundance and prosperity affirmations of I am paid to be me, I live a prosperous life, like all of these things, just reaffirming that to myself. And again, I just think that's like a really, really powerful thing for a lot of entrepreneurs because I know that they struggle sometimes with like, well, what am I going to do with my life? What direction am I going to take my life? I just know I want to work for me. And you just have to reaffirm to yourself, I am paid to be me. And even if that thing you love doing doesn't necessarily have a job description or a job title yet, you can co-create that for yourself. Like a lot, like 10, 15, 20 years ago, a podcast host was not technically a job title. Like
Right.
nobody was buying houses saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm a podcast,"
Yeah.
but people have co-created that career for themselves and people can still do that. They have to remember that. Being a YouTuber wasn't a thing back then. Being a podcaster wasn't a thing back then. Being a TikToker wasn't a thing back then, but now we have created this thing for ourselves.
Right. And first of all, I love that idea of getting the bank checking slip. I think I'm going to
Yeah,
go do that on Monday. I'm going to go
do
pick up
it.
one of those.
Yeah.
And even that, there that just sounds so authentic too. I love that affirmation of I am paid to be me. It's so just concise, subtle, and it resonates. It has everything in there that is what you want to be. I mean, it's probably the it's a very resonating affirmation of almost self-fulfillment in a sense
Hmm.
where it's everything kind of just put into that one statement or that one idea.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that's powerful for a lot of people. uh that's probably powerful for anybody to want to take their self to that more like holistic place almost.
Yeah. And I mean, I really just I think I heard it on a conversation with I don't know if you follow Aaron Dowdy and Heather Activation Vibration. They were talking
uh
about it.
Maybe.
And I think that's where I first heard it. And I was like, yeah, I just want to get paid to be me. Like, I don't necessarily want to have such a strong structure of like, this is my job title and this is what I do because I love doing so many things. But I just want to be paid to be me. That's just it. And I think a lot of us, part of being you is what you're passionate about, and a lot of us want to get paid for what we're passionate about or for the things that we create if we're artists or speakers or writers. And it can house so many people's passions and purposes that I think that's really like a strong affirmation we just have to start implementing more.
Just got to take it on.
Yeah. Yeah, write it on your forehead. No, I'm kidding.
Get a little tattoo
Get
down
a little
here.
tattoo,
Yeah,
little tat.
just a little tatted. Something I'm thinking of, and I'm not sure if you want to go into it, but on our last podcast, we also talked about Salem a little bit,
Oh yeah.
and I know there have been a few developments. Do you have any interest in talking about that yet?
Yeah, sure, for
Yeah,
sure. So yeah, I don't know if you guys listened to episode 2 yet, but that probably would help to
more
get a
encouragement to go listen.
background, yeah, get a background story of why I had to go to Salem, Massachusetts. But I went at the end of October, and it was definitely an interesting experience. We did kind of the touristy things and stuff, but I felt like something was missing the entire time I was there. And I didn't know why I was there. And I think this also ties into like we can't see past the choices that we make. Um, did not know why I was there. I thought something maybe would happen, but then there was like this inherent thing inside of me that was telling me like you're not gonna know now. Like nothing big or spectacular is gonna happen for you to know exactly what's going on. But I was staying open and I was staying, hopeful to whatever I needed to experience there. I set my intentions prior to going and stuff. But on the very last day, I talked to an intuitive, I talked to a psychic, and she sort of picked up on that energy right away. And she's like, "You're not going to know what you were here for until months from now." And it might just be something so underlying that it's just unblocking a certain aspect of your consciousness or a certain aspect of your soul that you're just simply not even aware of yet, and you just have to go with it. And
Is that good?
I was just saying like I'm just kind of sitting with that still. To be honest, still don't know what the purpose of me being there was. I'm just sort of trusting that, whatever had to happen on a metaphysical level happened. And I possibly could have had like a past life there and I had to go back just to maybe finish something up or just feel the way I feel now there. And I also did pay my respects to the people that were, um, you know, executed and stuff. So,
What are the things to do there? Like if I was to go to Salem, what are the
um,
tourist things?
well, definitely the best or the most fun time to go, of course, is like October and around Halloween. We did the Salem Witch Museum, which was cool. It's like a very quick experience, though. That wasn't my favorite thing while we were there. We went to the House of the Seven Gables. That's another really popular like attraction. That was probably my favorite, just because it had so much history there and the scenery was like beautiful. They were telling the stories of the people that lived there and stuff. Beautiful house as well. And there's also the Salem Witch House, which is also another house with a lot of history behind it. And there is, I'm trying to remember, is it Essex Street? I think that's like the main street where everything is, like all the shops and the psychics and like people dressed up. It was, just kind of like a fun thing to do over a couple of days. I've definitely have been other places that are like more eventful, I guess you could say. But I think if you're just like really into Halloween, or if you have like a purpose of being there like myself, then it's definitely a place you want to visit.
If like something's calling to you,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
definitely
Like
something to go check out.
yeah, like in my case, the universe was obviously calling me there for a certain purpose. So I went there and I, wrapped up whatever I needed to wrap up, I guess. um
The
and
karmic
I feel
circle.
better. Yeah, it probably was something more karmic, but I feel better now saying that I was able to go. I do kind of feel like something's not empty anymore. Like I was able to close something out, or I was able to complete something. Um,
That's interesting.
yeah, so maybe I'll have a better like understanding of that. Maybe like the psychic was saying, or maybe it'll show up on a more physical level, and I'll finally understand why. But right now, it's more of just like a silent feeling.
Okay.
And I'm just kind of happy and satisfied that I was able to go.
Well, that's all. I mean, anything
Yeah.
you can do to, feel a little bit more complete or
Yeah.
satisfied, I mean,
Yeah.
that's worth its, weight in itself.
Absolutely. Very grateful for that. And I mean, you probably have experienced that just like going to Brazil or other places you've been called to go. Because I know
That's
you're
so funny you say
traveling.
that.
Yeah.
I was
Why is
literally
that?
because
Spill the tea.
as you were as you were saying, you were just like, yeah, I'm not really sure why it went da 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 da, and I was like, holy shit! Like just as in this conversation, I was thinking to myself like, damn, I felt that same way about Brazil. Like I
Really?
felt that same way about Porto Alegre. Like I was having like little mini flashbacks of like, when people would ask me like, "Oh, what are you doing in Porto Alegre? Like, why are you here?" My answer was like, "I don't
I
know."
don't know. I feel that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know, but to your point, it did feel kind of like, I got to see that. I got to live by myself. I got to experience that.
Yeah.
And I'm down to go back to Brazil at some point for certain things, but maybe it's, like you're saying, maybe there's just like a completion that needed to happen there, or I don't know, maybe 2021 was wrapping up in a weird way for, I, it's hard to put into words.
And actually, that made me think of something I was talking about with one of my best friends recently. She recently just moved to Spain, and she was living in Colorado prior to that. And she's like, I feel like there's this identity of me attached to Colorado. And then I feel like there's an identity of me attached to Spain. And then I was talking to her about, like, well, there's this thing in astrology called astrocartography. And essentially, there are certain planetary points mapped out on the earth that trigger certain aspects of your chart, therefore, triggering certain aspects of you, your personality, your life. Um, and so I was like, well, that's actually a thing. Like there is a version of you that is more active in Colorado, and then there's a version of you that's more active in Spain, and there's parts of you that are more awakened in these places. Um, so I think as we go to these places that are calling us for whatever reason, we are awakening or maybe unblocking or triggering certain aspects within us that, again, we might not even understand yet, but there is something happening on a metaphysical level that we just have to trust and have
And
faith
I, yeah, and I think there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that because I grew up in Pittsburgh, went to college in Florida.
in.
First job was in California, and in a sense, I have felt that shift kind of occurring in my life as well, where, well, I don't feel like, and it wasn't like I wasn't being authentic or I was, I was being authentic, I was being myself, but it felt like every time I go to these new places that there was a little bit of a shift, and I think I internalized it as like, oh, I'm just maturing, and becoming more of who I am. But there still is a little bit of like that, push and pull of things, like of feeling certain ways in certain areas. And so the question I guess I would have is it the people that are there that kind of invoke that feeling or that shift that you have, or is it this metaphysical area of space in, this three-dimensional reality?
I definitely think there's truth to both because in terms of consciousness, we have these like collective consciousness clusters and then we have like this big collective consciousness of the earth. So I think that's true in that, you kind of start to think like the people in that city or even start to speak like the people in that city or act like it. You start to take some of that energy signature, let's just say. Um, but then I think there's truth to the other part too, where, you know, it is this point or this pool in space that has this certain energy that, is just triggering something within you. Um, and you also kind of have to think of it in terms of like time and space being kind of the same thing as well. I know I'm probably gonna really rack somebody's brain with that one, but
Yeah.
um, you're almost like stepping into another dimension or you're stepping into another parallel reality because you chose this certain destination. You chose this certain time and space to be here or there. Therefore, it's aligning you with a different timeline, it's aligning you with a different path and a different version of yourself.
And I guess is that it's aligning you with a different version of yourself based on where you're choosing to live, essentially,
Yeah.
or where you're
Yeah,
trying to
like
move.
yeah, where you're trying to move, where you're trying to live. A lot of people for some reason always think I'm from California. Even when I'm there, like I'm going back the first week of February, like some of the locals they ask me what part I'm from and I'm like I'm from the East Coast. Like I'm not from here. Or even people here um will ask me where I'm from. I was actually talking to a California native and she was like, the way you just talk and carry yourself, you just remind me of somebody from home. Um, so
It's
I think,
interesting.
yeah, I think that, I don't know if that maybe started after I came back from there and I started to take on some of that energy, or maybe that's just maybe eventually where I want to live. So I'm aligning myself with that energy and that version of myself that lives in California.
Right.
Um, so, there's this certain identity or this certain person or version of myself that lives there, let's just say in this now moment. But right now in this 3D reality, I'm living on the East Coast and I, in my head, can just act as if I'm in California right now doing a podcast with you.
Because I mean that's how you got to assume it, right, to
Yeah,
make
that's
it
how you have to
happen.
assume it. So then there's this version of me here now, but then I could assume that, oh, I'm stuck here on the East Coast. Or, whatever negative or limiting belief I have with that. And I could be acting as if from that and that could have a totally different personality behind it. Because your
Right, completely
personality is,
shift.
yeah, your personality is what makes up your personal reality. So there are always shifts with that.
Which is pretty crazy in itself. I've never thought that. I like that little play on the words. Your
Oh yeah,
personality makes up your
personality.
personal reality.
Joe Dispenza, love
That's
him.
a Joe Dispenza one.
Yeah, that's a joke. That was I think Becoming Supernatural. That was in that book, the
Okay,
first book I read from him.
I've read that one, but I don't. I guess I don't remember. I'll have to
Yeah.
get to like Breaking the Habit of Being. That's the next one on my
Oh,
list.
that's honestly out of the two books, I prefer that one.
Yeah.
Because Becoming Supernatural is more like a self healing book, or um, whereas Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself is reconditioning your brain and retraining your subconscious to, you
Okay.
know, change your personal reality. So
I'm gonna get Joe on the podcast at some
yeah,
point. That's
Joe,
a
what's
part of the
up? You gotta
manifestation.
you gotta join Clayton on the podcast soon.
Yeah, putting that energy out there.
Yeah, he's listening right now.
it, it's all happening right now, right?
It is. It is.
uh, well, I don't have anything else that I'm thinking of. I think it's a great part to wrap it up. Uh,
Yeah.
you'll definitely have to let me know if you make it down to San Diego because I should be in San Diego around that time. At least I'm
Oh,
hoping.
cool. Are you living there
Yeah.
now?
No, right now I'm in my back in Pittsburgh. My parents.
Okay.
I was
Cool, cool,
supposed to be in
cool.
Brazil, but as life just so happens,
Sometimes it
yeah,
redirects you.
things are out of your control, and all you can do is keep a positive vibe about it, right?
Yeah, just don't
It
worry
all
about the
happens for a
how and the
reason,
when. Don't worry about
right?
that.
Well, and that kind of maybe even goes back to our point is that I wasn't supposed to go back to Brazil. Maybe maybe
Yeah.
everything I got from Porto Alegre was all that I kind of needed at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the universe has a very funny way of letting you know certain things. That's for sure.
Damn, I actually didn't even put that together until now.
You're like, ooh, epiphany.
Yeah. So maybe I'm done with Brazil for a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see what
maybe.
happens.
Yep.
See what happens. Gotta recondition the subconscious. So
Yeah,
we'll
reassess, reawaken, become more aware of what's going on now and what you want, I guess.
yeah.
Are you
Is
doing
there
anything for the new year to do that?
um how do you mean? Like
Like, do you? I know I don't want to say resolutions because that has a negative connotation. Nobody follows those, but maybe are you like manifesting anything or like creating a vision board or scripting anything for the new year?
yeah, I'm scripting. I've got some things I've like written down on what's it called? Cha, 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 cha. Like goals that I would like to have,
Yeah.
but they're not very concrete. And what's your opinion on this? What's your opinion on like putting time frames, associating time frames with like certain things occurring? Like by February, I'll have this. By like you were saying in the first quarter, I'll have that.
Yeah. So I did think that while I was doing it last night. And I was writing out my first checking deposit slip from January 1st to March 31st, 2022. And I put that date down. I put my name, I put my bank account number, I put the monetary balance that I wanted to deposit or I wanted to see deposited. And I put a plus sign next to it because I didn't want to not only cap myself at that amount, I was basically that plus sign means like bare minimum, this is what I'm making in that 3 months. Um, and then also because I had the time frames following after that, so like April to June, it's a bigger increase of money. I think just, you know, that was just a sign or a symbol to the universe that my income is exponentially increasing. Um, the time frames just kind of give it a container. It's not necessarily that I'm capping myself at that time frame or that anybody else could be capping themselves. It's just a container and maybe just a guideline of when you would like to reach a certain goal or have a certain end moment. But I think that you whether you're scripting or whether you're just kind of visualizing or um, manifesting this for yourself, you have to say like bare minimum, this is the amount of time that it'll happen or sooner. Like always add that um, sort of objective, contradictory statement so that the universe, you know, knows that this could happen, or you're implying that this could happen at this moment or sooner, or you're having this amount of money or more. You know what I mean? So I think just putting that small amount of detail in there also just reaffirms the intention, reaffirms the assumption of it. But never, ever, ever put a cap or a time frame on something because it could happen sooner. It could happen tomorrow. Like it's really just a matter of aligning with a certain reality.
So then, is there like if you're doing something like visioning of some sort,
Mhm.
would you write or would you like work into it the date on the clock or something? Like
You could,
how?
yeah, you could put that in your visualization as just like a small detail of you looking at the clock and it being a certain time. Um, but I think really just staying with the assumption of it happening that time or sooner is probably the key of that.
Okay.
And
So it's
again, I
like
don't have all the
before
answers,
this
but
date. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
does anybody?
I know, right?
They were just kind of what, just meddling around trying to figure out what's going on.
We're all just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the date is something that I've been trying to figure out a little bit more. If I, because again, it's that balance between the feminine and masculine, where the masculine's like it's going to happen at this time versus the feminine being like, well, within this time frame, or
Yeah,
the feminine being like
exactly.
it could happen at any point, but
Yeah.
it.
But I think in our minds it's like, oh, is this even possible in this time frame? Like we start to put limitations on it, or like you said earlier, it takes 7 years to create a solid business. It could take somebody a year. So much can happen in a year, and we just have to remember that. And if even if it sounds realistic to you, like just rewrite your story and rewrite that belief, because whatever you believe is going to be true. If you believe it takes 6 months to build a solid business, you'll have a solid business in 6 months.
You're
You
right.
know, if it that's just what it is. Everything's literally created from your mind.
And that was something that I've like been working with, is to create like that, exponential ladder, is like start with something that seems like reasonable, but just like a little bit more,
Yeah.
like, if it's, a small increase in something, and then,
Yeah.
keep playing with that and kind of pushing your limits as to your, fundamental belief. Because you tell anybody, you're like, oh, you're going to have $1 million tomorrow. It's like the average person's going to sit there and be like, okay, that's BS. Like, that's
Yeah.
bullshit. But
Yeah.
then it's like, but that should be possible, right? If
It
anything's
should.
possible, then I should be able to manifest a helicopter dropping, $1 million out of the sky.
Yeah.
That's actually hilarious. I say that because there was a video yesterday where these guys were like stealing money, and their helicopter was like going down. And I see they're like, oh, we're gonna lose like altitude. You got to push money out, and they're like, we're gonna drop $50 million just like in the middle of nowhere.
And money's falling out of the sky.
Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, so it is possible. Like,
Yeah. You never know. There could be a helicopter hovering
right?
around your house. Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, are you a SpongeBob fan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easy, yes.
Yeah.
There's that Magic Conch episode. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where
Yep.
it's like the Magic Conch is just telling them to kind of like sit in the field. And
Yep.
Squidward sitting there like, what are you guys just doing sitting here? Like, we got to go get food, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, consult the Magic Conch. And
Yeah.
then
Yep.
they're like, food will fall out of the sky. And they're like, what the hell? And then it's literally a plane flying by. And it's like, you got to drop the
Yep.
load. And it's just like all these picnic supplies.
Yeah. And again, you don't know how it's going to happen. And even if you do have to play with small stuff like that, like you're saying, it really helps to build a stronger foundational belief. And then
Right.
that allows the universe to conspire even more in your favor. So, if you're practicing visualization and you're having a really hard time, like even realizing that a certain outcome is possible for you just because of what it is or the time frame that you're expecting it to happen in or whatever, start with something so small. Like I used to play with visualizing getting free cups of coffee and stuff all the time, and I kid you not, I get random cups of coffee from Starbucks all the time of somebody paying in front of me, or they're like, oh, we actually made the wrong drink, and we don't know who else to give it to, so here you go. So even if you're doing that, or just, I don't know if Neville Goddard is the one that talks about this or if it's somebody else, but I think they said to visualize like a yellow ladder as you're falling asleep, and then just wait for it to pop up in your external reality. And when you notice this yellow ladder, that helps to really reaffirm that strong foundational belief of, okay, I can really create whatever I want because this is something so small, but yet here it is.
Yeah. I think his thing was, it might have been actually climbing the ladder,
Was it
where you like,
climbing? Okay.
because it gets that visual like feeling involved of
Yeah.
like your
Maybe
hands
I
moving up
maybe
it.
I was the one visualizing yellow.
Yeah.
I was putting more detail into it.
That was the TR spin.
It was the TR spin.
Well, and it was funny because I told my brother this, who's my brother's very, very analytical, aerospace engineer. Like, he's
Oh, yeah.
very, yeah.
He's
And
smart.
yeah, I need to get him on the podcast, but well, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but
He'll be on. He'll be on.
he'll be on. He'll be on. I'm going to manifest him on.
Hmm.
And what was it? Oh, when I first like came across the Neville Goddard thing. The night I went to bed, we were skiing the next morning, and so I told myself like, okay, I'm gonna find $100 bill on the ski slopes tomorrow, and visualize myself putting it in my pocket, the whole thing. So I did that as I fell asleep.
Hmm.
The next day, we're skiing, and I ski ahead of my brother, and I like kind of stop a little bit and like turn around and wait for him, and I'm like looking up the mountain, and he comes and stops right beside me, and he goes, "Ooh, what is this?" He looks down and picks up a wallet, and I'm like, "What the fuck just happened?" Like,
I love
and
those.
yeah, he's like looking at it, and he's like ready to turn it in. I'm like, "Wait, just check if there's $100 bill in it."
Wait, wait,
Hey,
wait.
wait,
Finder secrets.
yeah. And I could tell by the way I said it that he like kind of built up some resistance as to like,
Yeah.
is Clayton going to keep this money if it's in there? And
Yeah.
and so I like didn't push it, but
Right.
he like kind of flicked through it, and it looked like it was at least $100.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, he ended up turning it into like patrol and everything.
Yeah.
And then I told him this whole story of like, Neville Goddard and then this, and he's like, so you would have kept the money if like it happened? I was like, no, I
That
I
wasn't part
wouldn't
of the
have kept that one.
manifestation.
No, that wasn't a part of it. I didn't manifest the wallet, just the money.
Yeah. I manifested finding the money. I didn't manifest keeping the money.
Yeah.
Yep,
And
exactly.
so that came across, what was it called? Brazen Impudence.
Oh,
I've only
okay.
read it. And so
Okay.
the common thing is this, and this actually goes back to that picture I told you about, how I drew that picture and then saw someone take a picture of it in, on my Instagram. It's like I'm still trying to figure it out, but the core concept is that, yeah, it's like it's the universe saying like, yeah, you figured out the secret, but it wants you to be more persistent in it. Like,
Hmm.
you need to fully believe in it. Like, it's like saying, okay, like, it's real, but you don't
Yeah.
fully, like, you don't
Like
feel
there's
that it's real.
a small blockage still in your subconscious,
Yeah,
and you got to figure
yeah.
out what it is.
It's exactly yeah. That's exactly like what I think that's essentially what brazen impudence. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
I'll
I've
have
only
to
seen
look
it
it up.
written. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because I posted the story on Reddit, and there's like a Neville Goddard Reddit, and
Yeah, I
the
did see
the
that
first
actually.
it I it's good to like get in there and figure it out, see the success stories, but it's
Yeah.
one of those things where it becomes a hole that'll just suck you in if you
Yes.
stay too long. Yeah.
Yes.
And so I posted my story, and the guy was like, "Oh, bras and impudence. Like, this is what happened. Like, research bras and impudence, and like, you're on the right path. Just keep doing it." And I was like,
Hmm.
"All right, cool." And so,
Yeah.
that's where
It's a
it led me
nice
down.
reaffirm like reminder that you're learning it and you're doing it right, but as a human being we still have these things that we have to work through. Like, I mean, if we had the keys to make $1 million in a year, we would have done it already, you know what I mean? But
Right.
we have to unblock those things in our subconscious or rewrite those stories or limiting beliefs so that we can get there. And of course that does take sometimes some time, but you
It's
can do
sometime,
sometimes
sometimes,
sometimes.
sometime.
um so time being a limitation and all, but like you can do that today. You can have that epiphany or that realization or that sudden you know unblockage today and make that tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, and I truly believe that, like, because you can kind of feel it at a certain level, that
Yeah.
there is like, especially with how the more complex maybe you make this visualization or this scene, you can feel that there's those little doubts that creep in throughout your day. And this is the crazy thing that I've noticed is throughout my day, I'll notice these little like negative thought processes that are the opposite of what that that manifestation I'm trying to get at.
Mhm.
And so it's taking that second to be like, wait, no, 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 that's not what happened. This is what happened.
Mhm.
Like, and it's so fascinating to me how it's like, just staying persistent with it, be consistent, just keep pushing forward, and it'll like kind of happen, or have faith that it'll happen.
Yeah. Isn't it like I don't know where I heard this from, but they say like it takes 3 positive thoughts to eliminate 1 negative one or something like that.
I've heard
Or
something
maybe
like that too.
7. Oh god, I hope you can't hear my stomach growling in the mic.
I
But
miss it.
my metabolism's so fast. I literally just ate. But or maybe it's like 7 positive thoughts for 1 negative one to like eliminate it. But the consistency and the persistence, it will really pay off in the long run.
And that's a good reminder, I think, that if you've built up this lifetime of, I'm poor, you need to build up a lifetime of I'm rich.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to just happen overnight that you're going to be able to just imprint this subconscious belief. And
Yeah.
if anyone's still a little weary on this, first of all, I admire you for sticking around to the end of this podcast.
Yeah.
But as another like anecdote, I know that there's conversations about people who it goes both ways. They're not intelligent, or they are unintelligent, yet they have a ton of money, or they are intelligent and have no money. And it goes back to that conditioning of the subconscious, of you being able to imprint into your subconscious behavior. It's like, well, if you're dumb and just have all the money in the world, you know what I mean? It's like you can
Mm-hmm.
be all these things without the need to be intelligent. Like you can have what you want without, because you don't need to know the how. You just have to have that vision of it being reality and feeling that that vision is reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see it all the time. Like people blow up overnight or they get rich overnight over sometimes like the most pointless things on social media. I don't want to say pointless because, they had a purpose for them, but like things that you'd never expect to like go viral or make that amount of money. Um it happens all the time. Like we literally see it all the time.
Yeah. And it's probably just that belief structure. At some point, it's like, maybe that person believed hard enough that they were going to go viral,
Mhm.
excuse me, at one point. And it's just like the universe finally was like, yep, here you go.
Here you go. There it is, you know.
And
They
it's,
can only
yeah,
I was gonna say they like the universe can only give you what you assume.
right. I mean, it's so powerful in that regards. And I feel like I've been seeing since being exposed to this like whole subconscious creates your reality. I feel like it has put so much more stuff in perspective
Hmm.
of when people say stuff or things occur. Like, whenever people say like, oh, like who am I trying to think of? I think like it was Marilyn Monroe, and I think she was recorded saying like, when she was younger, people always told her like, you're not going to make it as a Hollywood actress, you're not going to do that. Or it was her, she was in an interview and they were saying that, and they're like, well, like what got you past this? And she was like, well, I just dreamed harder than they did. Like she was able to, and it's all these like little things that kind of hint that it's just like whatever you're programming into yourself at night, I think especially, and I think that's something we probably don't not give ourselves enough credit for, is like those like things that we go to sleep with is what we take to bed and imprint on ourselves for like the days and for the rest of our lives to come.
Yeah, absolutely. It has an immediate effect, especially I think did you really catch when Neville was talking about how you feel when you go to sleep?
A little bit, but remind me.
So he talks about basically you really have to pay attention and be aware of the feelings, emotions, thoughts that you experience as you're falling asleep because they're going to have an immediate imprint on your subconscious mind because you're floating from beta to theta brainwave state. And there was a time recently, I think maybe last week, um, I went to sleep and I was feeling pretty frustrated about something that I didn't really externalize because I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go to sleep. I'll forget about it in the morning. Not a big issue. But as I fell asleep with that feeling of frustration and like slight anger, I experienced a psychic attack, honestly, that night. I've had experiences before. I don't know if I should get that much into it because I already know we're like an hour, 40 minutes into the podcast and we're like,
No,
now
go
we're
for
talking about psychic
it.
attack.
We can
Um,
go as long as we can. Go for it.
so I have noticed that I experience these negative psychic attacks where I experience lower vibrational beings whenever I go to sleep in a lower vibrational state. And, I had this, it was kind of a dream, but I know I was in between worlds because I was in my bedroom. Um, and I know I was in primarily my subconscious. And that just goes to show like your feelings, your thoughts. your energy is having an immediate imprint on your subconscious. And that immediately manifested for me because
Yeah.
when you're solely in your subconscious, there is no time, there is no space. Like things are almost immediate because they're so metaphysical. So I actually woke up from that night. I actually perceived one of my ancestors who was talking to me in Spanish, telling me to like use my crystals to basically protect myself. So it was this whole trippy experience, but that really just goes to show like you really need to pay attention to what you're doing, what you're feeling, what you're thinking as you're floating in between these brainwaves and these worlds essentially, because you're in this like entirely different like metaphysical world.
Yeah, you're almost becoming in contact with the world that creates your external world, whether
Mhm.
you like it or not.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so how do you in so I guess I've kind of heard people talk about, let's say, psychic attacks before. I The only symptoms I've kind of ever heard of are if you're feeling like drained. And so
Yeah.
I've felt that before, but like, people have said, "Oh, you're probably getting psychically attacked." And part of me kind of resonated with it, but I never really knew exactly what they meant by it. Are you able
Um
to go in more detail about it?
so it's definitely something I'm still trying to understand as I am on this journey of trying to unblock my intuition and abilities that I've been told I am trying to remember from past lives. Um, and this is like becoming more reoccurrent. So that same night prior to going to sleep, I did feel like a pain in my like upper shoulder area when I was around certain individuals that I I don't want to say not prefer to be around. I don't know how to put this. Like they and individuals that just take a lot more energy to be around, let's just put that way.
Yeah.
um Maybe energy vampire sort of vibe. I'll just put it in that context because I don't want to offend anybody, but and I knew at that moment, like I was kind of aware that this could not be the energy in my field that I'm feeling a physical of pain over or about. And I think it's coming from something outside of myself. Immediately after I left this event where these people were, I didn't feel it anymore. I was in my car driving home, and that physical pain dissipated. So I could only assume that that was sort of a psychic attack. And the umbrella term of psychic could really be like any intuitive or metaphysical ability. So in that context, that was more clairsentient, where I was feeling a negative energy manifestation of someone else that was just imprinting on my energy field at the time. And I was feeling a physical manifestation of it. Um, but then, as I was carrying with me that energy throughout the night and I was trying to get rid of that, I felt frustrated with something else and a little angry. So that kind of had momentum behind it. And then I fell asleep that night and I came into contact with a lower vibrational being that I interpret to be a psychic attack when I experience it in between states of sleep, only because it's happened to me a few times and it's not fun. Um, and you have to like with your free will literally like sort of fight these lower entities. um and you wake up and it's kind of like a scary experience, but you have to like bring your energy back up and protect yourself and sort of create this like protective field around you so that that sort of thing doesn't happen again as you fall asleep. But that's what I consider to be more of a psychic attack, is like when I'm feeling a manifestation of somebody's energy in my field through any sort of clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, whatever. Or um, when I'm in my dream state or more of a subconscious state and I come into contact with a lower entity that I didn't invite in. And, they're trying to feed off of or imprint on my energy field. And,
Okay.
you can't allow that to happen. So you have to use your free will to dissipate that.
So how does that I'm trying to find a way to make the connection between, like, if we are God
Yeah,
and source energy, that has to be some sort of representation of ourselves as well.
absolutely. Yeah.
And how do you kind of reconcile that? Is that an external energy that is just also on this on Earth? Is that kind of just built up in your subconscious? I mean, I don't want to like. I guess I'm not sure where to kind of take that conversation almost.
Yeah, I mean, it could go so many different directions. I think I pick up what you're trying to say because essentially, we're of the belief that everything in your reality is a mirror reflection of you because you're the co-creator. This side of yourself is just a manifestation of you, your soul, your being God. Um, so I think in the context of the most recent experience I had, that was a subconscious thing because I was feeling something in my throat chakra that was being unblocked when I was in between worlds and in between that state of sleep and very subconscious in my room. So I think I did see a lower entity being that maybe was a manifestation of something in my throat chakra that felt blocked because again I said like I felt frustrated about something but I didn't externalize it and I didn't address it. So because I didn't vocalize it, that chakra probably felt as if it was blocked. And because the chakras even are said to have consciousnesses of their own, you know, they can co-create things too. I guess they can manifest in their own way too. So that's one thing. But when you kind of get to these like the astral realm or like the 4D 5D reality spectrum, um there are like people that astral project and stuff talk about encountering other entities or other beings. Um, and, you can look at it from the perspective of, it's just a projection or manifestation of whatever you believe and whatever's going on in your consciousness personally. Or you can look at it from a more external point of view if that's just what's going on around you. But recently, I will say I have been looking at it from a point of view of everything that happens is just a projection of my consciousness.
Right. So I guess in that sense, then it could be almost that those, let's say, dark entities are, I guess, energy from your past per se, or from times that resonate with you that we're trying to seep back in maybe to your alignment with your throat chakra. Like, did you feel like you were pushing out energy from your throat chakra that kind of cleared the space in this moment?
Mm, I think yes. Like there was something that was trying to clear out because so basically what happened in the context of the experience was I sat up in my bed and I was encountered with this like darker entity and I could tell they were kind of feeding off of me, but this here I just felt like tight, almost like a knot in your throat, like when you get choked up about something.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept trying to like scream, stop, stop, stop at this entity. But I think what it was, if I'm trying to make sense of it, is just the consciousness of my throat chakra itself, and there was like a duality or like a binary moment where like between my ego consciousness of my throat chakra and my soul consciousness or like that of more love saying like stop holding yourself back from saying these things, stop not allowing yourself to set these boundaries or set protective energy over yourself with your words or whatever meaning I were to give at that moment. But the way it feels in that moment is so strong and it's almost like you can't even put it into words. It's hard for me to explain sometimes, but when you wake up from this, it almost feels like you experienced a nightmare or you encountered some sort of like lower entity being. But then when you realize that it could possibly be just a aspect of you or a projection of you trying to tell yourself something, it helps you understand it a little bit more and clear and transmute that energy out. So I think in that sort of situation, it was more of a clearing and a transmutation of energy for my throat chakra because even, after that instance is when I also started setting better boundaries for myself.
Gotcha.
Um, so, it can happen in so many different ways, but what it, the other interesting thing that happened was when I did wake up and I was fully conscious, I started seeing these bigger energy fields in my room of light, and they were kind of just like zooming by, just kind of around. And I could tell that that was probably just like my team of light protecting me or kind of trying to help me clear out that energy. Again, could be other aspects or projections of me. Um, and I saw one really big dark one, just like in this corner where I was also experiencing in my dream state.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, yeah, I don't want that to be here. But of course, at the time, I was
Yeah.
really scared and I wasn't really thinking about it rationally or understanding it from this perspective. And I was just asking for assistance to help clear it out. You know what I mean? Which, again, I saw the reassurance of that helping me out. And there was way more light. And then there was just the one darker, bigger energy field. Um, and it's scary, of course, when you're so energetically sensitive like that, because you're not going to really understand at the time what's going on until after the fact. Um, but again, I had an encounter with one of my ancestors who was speaking to me in Spanish, and that's the only reason I knew it was an ancestor, because of my lineage. And the vision that popped up in my head and then audibly was Spanish woman's voice, and it looked like my grandmother or my grandfather's mother, or either I interpreted it as like a future version of my now aunt because she looks like her. That was the vision that popped up in my mind, and telling me like utilize your crystals, use your crystals, put one underneath your pillow, set up a grid in your room, is like the message that sort of I received in like maybe a minute. Like it seems almost like an immediate transfer of information.
Right.
Um and for some people it feels like a conversation like this. For me, it feels like split, like bits of information, and the only like audible thing I heard was the woman talking to me in Spanish telling me to use my crystals. So it's still something, again, I'm trying to understand myself. I think maybe after going to Salem, there are things that are unblocking for me that now I'm starting to experience these things more and more. Um, but I myself am a student of the universe. I'm a student of my own soul. So I'm still trying to learn and understand all this. But hopefully, like my stories and me trying to make sense of my experiences is like helping somebody else out there. Because I know this sounds so trippy right now.
Yeah, it's wild, but it all I can say is it sounds super true to you, and
Hmm.
therefore, makes it real in a sense. Like, I'm trying to, put myself in your situation of kind of like what you went through there. And it's difficult to do, but it it like it resonates. Like what you're saying, resonates at a level. And I'm hoping as well, like you said, that someone else is like, oh shit, I was in that situation. That happened to me, and I had no idea what to make of it.
Yeah.
And if someone is listening, I'm going to put Tiara's information down below, so you can certainly shoot her a message. She's always been
Yeah.
great to respond.
Feel free. Yes. I'll also
Yeah.
definitely be making a lot more content in 2022. I think there was also some success blockages for me the past few years that has kept me from just putting stuff out there. So I'll
What's your
definitely be sharing more.
what's the goal there? What's the goal there? YouTube, podcasts?
Everything. Like I used to have this I used to have too much masculine energy where I
Okay.
would like schedule things so regimented, and I would schedule a certain amount of YouTube videos and a certain amount of TikToks and a certain amount of podcasts and all of this. Now I just schedule myself creation days, and
Okay.
whatever um avenue I feel like going down, and whatever what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I guess whatever container I feel like using, like TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, that I feel is fitting for the type of information I'm giving out or the length of the information I'm giving out, so on and so forth, is what I'm doing now. It's just something that feels more true and authentic to me. Because sometimes it is a bit more difficult for me to make longer content other than podcasts. I could talk for freaking hours. But for like YouTube, I would really struggle making long form content. It didn't flow as easily for me. So I'm probably going to make shorter form content. And, the longer form content will probably be more vlog style, is what I'm thinking right now. But I'm just going with creation days. Like, I'm going with the flow. Whatever I feel like, resonates for me when I wake up that day, whatever bit of download or information I receive to share, I'm just going to do that because that's just what feels more authentic.
That sounds like a good plan, right? And
Yeah.
that's something I have been trying to like meddle with as well, is like finding that balance is a weird word, but just creating stuff. Like I've been trying to put together a blog, podcast, YouTube, and it's like it can get overwhelming for sure
Yep.
when you're like, well, I have to do this and I have to create this and I have to do that. And it's like
Yeah.
it becomes a lot whenever you're like, well, I have to do all of these at this certain time, but you need to take an appreciation for that ebb and flow of, the ups and downs of, creation for that
Yes.
matter.
Yeah.
Like as an example, over the next week, I have like 4 interviews scheduled,
That's
which
amazing.
yeah, I love it. I'm like, holy shit, this is taking off. I am, everything that I've been trying to, make happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so the beauty of that is then, if I there's a double-edged sword there, I guess, because it's like, all right, this is sweet. I'll be able to get these done and, be able to, have these all through halfway through February, and then I don't need to worry about recording a podcast. But, I don't but you can't take that mentality into recording the podcast or it's going to be trash, or if I burn myself out, that's not going to deliver high quality content.
That's another killer. Yeah.
So you need to be able to feel into when you should be doing or producing what you need to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think uh a big problem with that, with the perfectionism, which I know we've both struggled with in the past, but putting so much pressure on yourself does not serve you at all. Like, it does not help
No.
anything. I know that's something that really fed sort of that regimented structure that I used to sort of go off of, that never worked for me. I ended up never following it because it didn't have the room to ebb and flow. It didn't have the flexibility. And I couldn't really feel into that moment like I would if I just like got up and, did this podcast with you. Or if I just got up and I was like, you know what? I've had these few epiphanies this week. I'm just going to share them on TikTok really quick, like
Yeah.
just those sort of things. And just focusing on like creating the content and getting it out there and loving it rather than like feeling so much pressure about it being done a certain way or getting it done within a certain time. Just having a lot more freedom with that, I have noticed, like, has helped me so much. So, hopefully like you experience that too. I know you've done like an amazing job already with your podcast, to be honest. Like, you're super consistent and stuff, but I know
Appreciate it.
that freeing yourself of that like pressure and that like perfectionism feels so much better.
Yeah. And just, I've it's so funny because I have listened to old podcasts I've done and been like, oh, like I need to cut that out or I need to do this different. But it's just a part of that growing process where now, if someone's listening to that old episode with us and now listening to this, the goal for me is to hope that they're like, oh wow, Clayton's like gotten a lot better at like hosting this, and
Yeah.
even the guests. And this is a part of the reason I wanted to bring you back on is, to see like how things have unwound and like how things are going now. And
Yeah.
obviously gonna have you back on, I'm sure at another point in the future, but like that's kind of the whole process of this, of seeing how that whole thing undoes itself almost. Like it's not
Yes.
perfect, it's never going to be perfect,
No.
but just keep making it 1% better and see how
Mm-hmm.
that kind of flows.
Yeah, that I mean that evolution, that's what life is about too, like evolving. And we just have to stay true in that. Like, you're never going to get to the end point of which you've evolved, because that's the whole point in the first place. So you just have to like enjoy the journey and, appreciate the fact that like you may not have all the tools and the resources right now, but if you feel that there's value in what you know now, or value in what you're putting out, then there is. Like, you got to just trust that.
Right. And it's having like that trust within yourself to kind of just to feel it. All right.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I think that's a beautiful spot to leave this off on.
I think
Did
so
you
too. I just
do you have anything
Go
else you
ahead.
want to add?
No, I think that was an amazing conversation. I feel like our conversations are so quick, but then I look at the time and I'm like, oh, we've been talking for 2 hours.
It's like, oh, that's why I'm hungry.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
um, okay, well, with that being said, Tiara, I appreciate you being here. Everyone that's still listening, thank you for listening. If you're listening on Apple or now even Spotify, I know they do rating systems, so please leave a rating. If you're listening on YouTube, drop comments below. I'll reply to all of them. Give me some thumbs up, subscribe, follow us on our platform, see what's going on. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying this. And with that being said, let's keep growing together.